So are you here yet? When do you get into Seattle? You're calling the whole series, right?
Calling the whole series. So coincidentally, I've never called a game at T-Mobile Park in 13 years of doing Major League Baseball. I've never called a game at Comerica Park in Detroit. These are two of
Crazy.
like the four ballparks that I still had on my checklist. So I mean, again, personal thing, I'm thrilled for it, but I know how epic it's going to be this weekend, and I'm very, very excited for it.
How's that possible? 13 years. Is that because the Mariners haven't been the main show at Fox? Is that maybe some of that over the 13 years?
Something to do with it.
I think that's part of it. The first Major League game I ever called on television when I was working at ESPN was a Mariners game, but it was in Los Angeles. It was against the Angels. And I think I've called one road Mariners game with Fox, and that's it. This is the first time I get to walk in. I remember I used to do NFL games for this, for national radio. And when we'd park to do Seahawks games, we'd park on that parking garage near the stadium, near what's now Lumen Field, and you could look into T-Mobile Park when we would park on the top of that parking garage. And I always thought, man, that place looks awesome. I'd love to get a chance to do a game. And you just assume, well, I'm sure at some point we'll get a chance. I'm sure they'll send us there for some game or some assignment. It just has never happened, and now we finally get to do it.
I think this is going to be a little better than like an April Wednesday against, the Guardians. Like this is going to be off the hook. I mean, it really is going to be crazy with the Seahawks playing Sunday and the two Mariner games, and even the Sounders play Saturday night. Is just going to be a complete zoo all around there. Outside of sort of the personal element of getting to see it for the first time, what jumps out to you? What are you looking forward to with this series?
Gosh, I mean, I especially Sunday is my assumption, and we know none of this yet, and we're going to figure it out, obviously, as today goes on and more so tomorrow as well. But how the pitching matchups are going to line up, if we're leaning towards Tarek Skubal pitching, in his old stomping ground, so to speak. He loves, obviously he cares a lot about Seattle. My guess is he's going to pitch on Sunday in Game 2. And as soon as we know that for sure, we're going to be building up every time Cal Raleigh comes to bat against Tarek Skubal. These are two of the elite players at their positions, in their positions, their roles for their particular teams. You saw what Skubal did, obviously, the other day. The storyline of Skubal being a Seattle U guy, but being beaten by the Mariners twice this season. They're one of the few teams that have beaten Tarek Skubal twice. He had that great stretch. I think it was like 16 starts where he went 10-0, and the two losses he suffered on the top end and back end of that were against the Mariners. So, they've played him well. Luis Castillo's pitched well against him. I think the pitching for Seattle is something that sticks out in a big way, especially, considering when, if at all, Brian Wu is going to pitch in this series. But to see Logan Gilbert, maybe Castillo, probably Kirby, this has been the identity, the main thing. And I know the offense finally took the uptick this year, and Cal had a ridiculous year. But the pitching has been the identity of this team for the last few years, going back to when they finally made the playoffs in 22. So, it's not as good of a rotation in terms of numbers. It hasn't been as consistent because of the injuries this year relative to last year. But those are the things that are sticking out to me for the Mariners in particular.
Off the top, I just happened to look it up. Do you know what Cal is against Skubal in his career?
I don't have the numbers. What do you give it to me right now?
Two for 9 with one home run.
That's okay.
2 for 9, one home run. It was a 2-run shot, and he struck out 3 times.
So just the buildup of that, because it's not just that first at bat, it's the buildup to, well, how is he going to do it the second time through? What adjustments do we make? And this is what happens in the postseason, because every pitch gets magnified, right? And we call games differently because every pitch is magnified. We have to back off a little bit, and we can't get too far into the weeds on any one particular thing, because the pitch is the thing. I've called 1-0 games before, and it's just the one pitch might be the one. So the magnification, the weight that is going to be on each of those at bats is huge. And then I want to see what does this team do with the expectation? Because this is the first time it feels like, and you guys please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just the general sense that I get. 3 years ago when this team made the playoffs, it was like a fun thing. It was like, oh man, finally they made it. Cal Raleigh, walk off. They're going to the postseason for the first time in 20 plus years. And it's like, all right, that was a great game. They lost the Astros. I know that was an awesome 18-inning game, but okay, whatever. They finally got back. Now let's make it happen. The last 2 years felt a little bit torturous to miss out by a game, to keep missing out. this doesn't feel like a cute story to me anymore. Like just watching the Mariners, they feel like in what I think is a wide open American League and frankly a wide open playoffs, this feels like a legitimate contender. This isn't a cute story, I think, for people. And I want to make sure that when we hit the air on Saturday, that might be one of the first things we say to try to introduce the team again. Say, this isn't a cute story. This is an expectation of victory. And this is one of the favorites, I think, out of the American League to make a deep run and maybe make the World Series for the very first time.
Yeah, they're not the kids' table. You know,
Yep.
Julio was a kid, Cal was a kid, Logan was a kid. They were all young, right? Julio's rookie year, and that was a kids' table. Now you're at the grown-ups table. Now you are the odds-on favorite to win the American League. Now you are a team that everybody around the league is looking at, going, "Geez, that could be a World Series contender." Nobody was necessarily looking at. Now the pitching was that elite in 22 to get you there.
Sure.
But this feels so adamant. I think you nail all of that when you say, Salk, like all of that is spot on.
100% accurate.
Yes.
I think if you opened with that on FS1 tomorrow, I'd be like, yep, 100%. That's where they're at. We said earlier, it's an opportunity for, what's at stake for them this weekend. I think there's an element of trust from the fan base that has bought in and come back.
Yep.
And after some real valid frustration the last couple of years, said, all right, I'm going to give you another chance. This team is built a little different. There's a little bit more offense than we've seen. There's a little more veteran quality at bats than we've seen. The pitching staff obviously has been really deep. Like they went for it at the deadline, and from everything you hear, ownership was a big part of that as well, pushing to go get more and more, and went out and got those two guys, Naylor and Suarez. So yeah, I think they've asked the group, the fans, to trust them. And now you got to go out and deliver. There's absolutely more pressure and more expectation on them than there was a few years ago.
And Cal's probably at the forefront of that, right? I mean, he's the one that called out ownership a couple of years ago and, was like, hey, sorry for saying it, but I don't apologize for saying it, right? Like this,
and also the guy who signed the contract before this year effectively supporting ownership and management and saying, hey, yeah, we've had our differences, but I'm willing to sign because I've seen the plan and I'm ready to move forward with what they want to do. So, yeah, I think you have all of that incredibly accurately.
I don't think we get enough of this when it comes to playoff time because we love seeing the Yankees in the postseason. I know networks love seeing the Yankees when they get them. That's fine. That's all well and good. That's appreciated. I like seeing superstars. I want to see Ohtani. I want to see Judge. I want to see Harper. I want to see these guys. But in the American League, where it is more wide open, I don't think fans know much about the Toronto Blue Jays. Why would they, in general, unless you're a hardcore baseball fan? Like the sum of the parts of the Blue Jays are really, really good. The sum of the parts of the Mariners are really, really good. And I think there's more star power than people realize in Seattle. It's a really likable team. Like Cal Raleigh is an incredibly likable superstar. Julio Rodriguez is an incredibly affable guy, an easy person to root for. Suarez is the prodigal son, it feels like, and that's a great story to be able to tell. Josh Naylor's got a chance to knock out the team that eliminated his brother from the postseason. That's an easy, hook for people. Like this is a very easy team to get invested in. And I think that's what makes it, again, I love a great matchup. We had Mets-Phillies last year, rivalry, all that. That's all fun, and it has its own sense of excitement. This has a different feeling of excitement, and I think for us as baseball broadcasters and guys who do this job, the storytelling aspect of this is really entertaining. And then the atmosphere on top of all that is going to be the most, one of the most electric that you're going to see in Major League Baseball.
I don't know how you go about your work each and every week in football and baseball and basketball and all the things you do. But for me, Adam, it was always fun, especially when I was in the SEC, to fly into those markets and I'd immediately find their local radio. I needed to listen to it. I needed to hear it because those guys are living it, breathing it every day of their life. Kind of like we have with the Mariners, really, over the last month and a half of this season, as they have just taken us in, our audience in, everybody in. We know our team. Tell me about this team from Motown coming in, because it was wow, a fall and a pitfall unlike anything we've seen through the month of September. But it's all zeros now. It's all level now. They win a series. Talk to me about the Tigers coming into town.
I think this past week is the ultimate reset button, right? And I know that you can make a lot of arguments that, well, if they had just stayed or maintained or even had a mediocre second half, and let alone a collapsing September, if they were just average for the last 2 months of the season, yeah, maybe they would be sitting in a bye. Maybe they would have had the best record in the American League, maybe even baseball, and maybe wouldn't have had to grind through a series against Cleveland. That's a fair assessment, but this is probably where they were going to end up. It was probably going to be a series like this where you're going to have to take on a team with a good atmosphere, with a really good offense. This is probably where they were going to end up. So I think winning that series against Cleveland, getting some offense in game 3, that's the ultimate reset button for AJ Hinch. So now he gets to play around with, you got to play around with the rotation, and that's the one disadvantage, the main disadvantage I think teams that come out of the wild card have. You have to be a little bit more judicious about how you use your bullpen and how you manage your starters. But I don't think there was much about this team that screamed they were going to win 100 games. I think they were probably closer to being a 90-win team than an 87-win team. But if you talk to some of the folks around the Tigers, and I had a chance to talk with both, our buddy Aaron Goldsmith about the Mariners and our friend Jason Benetti about Detroit. JB was telling me the other day that, they probably got a little over their skis. I think it was weird for them to deal with some success. I think they probably thought because they dealt with adversity earlier in the year and were able to bang through it, especially at the end of that first half, it felt like, all right, well, we'll be okay. And it's a younger team too. I think there's a lot of similarities between the roster construction for Detroit compared to Seattle. It's a bunch of homegrown kids that got some playoff experience last year, get back to the postseason now, try to use the experiences they had a season ago and against Houston and against Cleveland, and to try to parlay that into, all right, we've been here before. How do we now deal with the adversity? That's a hard collapse over the course of 2 months, but they also dealt with injuries. They didn't have Reese Olson. They didn't have Colt Keith. Like, these are key players over the course of a season that contribute, lengthen your lineup. The way we talk about Suarez and Naylor, the biggest thing they did for Seattle is make 6 and 7 in the lineup harder to deal with, right? When you take guys who are hitting maybe 4th and 5th and you slot them down to 6 and 7 and bring in Suarez and Naylor, who can now set up the middle of your order, that lengthens the lineup. That's the biggest thing I think is a problem for pitching staffs in the postseason, is how long is the lineup? That's what the Padres ran into. Even with all their velocity out of their bullpen, they ran into Cubs lineup length that hurt them. They got some stuff from the bottom of their order, turned it over to the top, and they got the pitching when they needed to. Detroit didn't have a very lengthy lineup for a good portion of the season. So how do they manage that? AJ Hinch is going to change the lineup as often as he can. He doesn't like putting out the same lineup day in and day out because he wants pitchers to have to think about it. He hit for Riley Green during this playoff series. Riley Green's your best hitter, and he pinch hit for him in a late game situation. I don't even think it was necessarily to generate something huge. It might have just been to make Dan Wilson think, all right, is he gonna hit for this guy late in the game? Like, you're trying to strategize your way. You're trying to find advantages in any capacity you can when you have dealt with the type of adversity that they have. But when you win that series, you hit reset. And now it is, as you guys accurately said, it's 0-0. You can kind of get back to some of the structure that you wanted to have. You go back out on the road, just like you did in Cleveland. That's something that I saw with Philadelphia, or with the Mets last year against Philadelphia. They had this long road trip. It bonded them a little bit. So this is going to be a hungry young team that has some playoff experience, similar to what we saw with the Mariners a couple of years
I am
ago.
a little curious about that managerial matchup. We're talking to Adam Amin, who's calling this series for Fox, starting on FS1. First 2 games will be on FS1 Saturday and Sunday. We did get a text here, Adam, saying, I love this guy calling games. I remember when he called the Seahawks-Steelers game. I liked it. He also has a pretty sweet broken nose look.
Yeah. All right. Well, since we do have the magic of our
if we're on YouTube here, let's see.
I'm gonna look straight into the screen. And
Yeah?
if you guys notice, it's not straight. This would be straight. This is just tilted off to the right a little bit.
Did you get
That
popped?
seems. I got popped when I was like 8 years old, but it wasn't anything that was like I would think about it. I've always thought, like, all right, at some point, maybe when I have the money, or when I have like a little bit of security, maybe I'll go to a doctor and get something fixed up. I've got a deviated septum, so I've never been able to breathe out of this nostril like since I was 8 years old. But
Who's the kid who
it's
hit
got
you?
some character.
Who's the kid who hit you?
God. I got hit with the butt of a baseball bat, like right with the
Whoa.
knob of a bat. It wasn't like an aggressive, angry thing. I think it was just I was rushing through our dugout on the third base side, and I got hit in the nose, and I don't even think I even realized how bad it was.
Wow. I thought it was a fight.
But here, It's got character. I hope that's what they tell. That's what they've told me for 20 years.
He says it's pretty sweet. Yeah, the texters seem to like it.
The girlfriend's happy. The partner's happy. She thinks it's like, don't change anything.
I mean,
that
you're on
gives me
TV.
a lot more. It's like, yeah,
You're
I got
a
a little
TV
character.
star, for God's sakes. Hey, so
get
tell
outta
me
here.
about this matchup between the two managers, because it is, AJ's done this a lot, and the one thing you can't help but notice as you watch all of these baseball games throughout the postseason is the way the pitchers, especially starting pitchers, are handled is in no way similar to the regular season, and it's guys either going longer than they would in the regular season, and that seems to be the star pitchers, Skubal and Crochet and others. And then the other side of it is guys who are like, oh yeah, 3 1/3, see you later, we're good, even though you've only given up a run or so. How do you think the two managers play a role in this series?
I think a lot of it has to do with the bullpen confidence. And, that's one thing I think the Mariners have that maybe other teams don't in this postseason is a solidified, legitimate 7, 8, 9 or back. And I do think Dan's going to be a little bit judicious at times to say, hey, if I need Andres Munoz in the 7th or maybe in the 8th inning, I won't be shocked if that ends up happening. If you got your highest leverage at bat, if you got a Riley Green coming up, or you got Carpenter or whatever it may be, you got runners on, I won't be shocked if Dan goes to, a Munoz earlier than we're used to seeing. But that's something that the Mariners have that a lot of the teams around baseball don't. That's a strong back end, solidified 7, 8, 9 group. And the Tigers have had to do it a little bit more by committee, and they've had to have Will Vest at times, and Tommy Kahnle has had to close at times, and we saw Daniel Palencia of the Cubs, who's typically been a closer, and I know he's dealt with injury. He came in like the 5th or 6th inning a couple of days ago for a high leverage spot. So I do think these managers are going to be very much about matchups and leverage, but I think the confidence in the bullpen and knowing what to expect from your starting pitching is going to help. It's very starting pitcher dependent. Like if you have Skubal, I know you can't always assume it, but your expectation is going to be, well, I'm probably going to get 6, maybe 7, and if he has the opportunity to go further, he's going to go. It's, do you have trust in that guy to stay out there? Carlos Mendoza of the Mets is very much like a gut feel guy. He's always said, like, I want to leave my guys out there if I feel like they're set for it. Every manager would prefer to start an inning clean for a reliever if they can, and that goes away a little bit come postseason. I don't think it's going to be too wild from Dan, but I do think some of these leverage matchups that may pop up over the course of this series and beyond if they advance, I do think you will see Munoz maybe pitch a different inning than the 9th. You might see Brash have to come in for a matchup at some point, maybe late or earlier than we're used to seeing him than the 7th or 8th inning. I think that's where it's going to kind of play more of a role. I think AJ Hinch is going to do whatever he can to piecemeal it together, because outside of Skubal, it's a bigger question mark just about every player, every pitcher that he throws out to the mound to start a game.
I might be wrong on this, but I don't think I will be. Adam, you've been in a lot of places, a lot of venues. I think you and I even called a spring game in Clemson at one time in our life together. Not that it was anywhere near what it's going to be Saturday night. 1991, the Rose Bowl. I remember walking through the corridor and out into the stadium, and it was like one of those aha, like, oh my gosh. I remember Monday night, my rookie year in Green Bay, same thing for warm-ups, like, oh my gosh. The fact this is your first time in 13 years of broadcasting, I think you're going to step into that broadcast booth Saturday night or whenever you get there, and you're going to feel something that is pretty unique in baseball. And if it's different, please tell me otherwise and text me otherwise. But you're going to feel 46,000 people that want this so damn bad, that want it so bad and have wanted it for 50 years bad and have never had the odds and the table stacked the way it is in this way. And I will be really curious. And if you wouldn't mind, shoot me a text at the end of the night going, yeah, you're right on that. Or, well, it was a little underwhelming, man. I'm a little jelly because I think you're going to have and be set up for an unbelievable scene.
I don't think it's going to be the latter. I don't think I'm going to walk out of there and go, I was underwhelmed. Because, Seattle's been one of my favorite places to come to since I started covering the NFL. Just one of my first games I ever called was a Jets-Seahawks game after a 5.5-hour drive overnight from the Palouse after doing a UCLA-Washington State game. I feel like you've probably made those drives too a couple times. I just remember that game immediately getting a sense for like the fan base in this city and how passionate they were, even though they hadn't felt at that point the level of success they'd eventually feel from football. I know the WNBA, like has a lot of success here. I know soccer's been very successful, but I think there's something about the history of this franchise to go back to some of the great moments in the 1970s and to see some of the struggles in the 80s and to see the, especially for somebody like me, people of my age, late 30s, we were obsessed with the 1990s Mariners. We were obsessed with Ken Griffey Jr. We were obsessed with Jay Buhner. And to think that like Edgar Martinez was this incredibly high IQ hitter, and now he's running the show essentially for this offense. And, you have great stories strewn about this city in its sports history, but this to me feels a little bit different. Part of that is the romanticism I feel for this game, for the sport of baseball. Part of it is the electricity that comes with doing a playoff series. But I think the combination of those things, along with the fan base that I've enjoyed getting to know a little bit, in my dealings on the television side, radio side, coming to Seattle all these years, I do get the sense that this is going to be a little bit different. The apprehension of 22, I think, the one game that you got, granted it was the price of two.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of apprehension and a lot of nervousness, and I think it was a little bit of a different feel. I agree with you, Brock. Just getting the sense for this place, it's going to feel different on Saturday, and I hope the game matches that electricity.
Pretty cool. Well, again, more text. Stoked you guys have Adam Amin on this morning. He's awesome. Matt in Oregon weighs in. It's weird how Salk just assumes everyone has people who have punched them in the face, just like everyone wants to punch Salk in the face. So a lot of text coming in. Very busy text line, Adam. Seriously, thank you. Enjoy it. Should be a blast. And it's going to be beautiful out and just a really cool environment in Soto this weekend. So thanks for spending some time. Hopefully we can chat again next week and enjoy yourself. We'll talk soon.
Appreciate you guys very much, man.